So maintain the complexity and drop the number of things rather than sacrificing complexity itself. Because people understand that your work is complex, and they want to leave feeling like you're doing good work that's complex and that nobody else understands. That's a piece of it. This is kind of dull. This is good linguistics for all of you. The key thing here is this. This is the way you talk in the office. This is the way you talk to your peers. This is the way you write your journal articles, using a scientific register that you have completely internalized as part of your graduate programming, or reprogramming, we could call it. This is the way you talk to your family, your friends, your parents, and when you're out having a beer. Now, I drink beer with some scientists, and I know that scientists tend to stick in this language after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And especially if they think the other person knows anything, they really tend to stick here. And we all do it. So I do it when I talk with my wife and I. My wife's a social scientist too. And when we talk, at dinner time about work stuff, there's just all this jargon that flies back and forth. Nobody else would understand hardly any of it. That's a professional deformation of being a scientist. So what that means is that you have to make a sort of active task to do this. And this is where the length comes in too. So when I write NSF grants, and you only got that 15 pages to get everything set in, one of the best ways to cut text that is otherwise really important is to change it to active speech. Don't use it was, it appeared, we discovered, it was discovered that. Just say we found out, we discovered. Use that active speech. Shrink the sentences. 40-word sentences are great for journal articles. They're not good for posters and communications. Concrete subjects, not eutrophication. This is a great word. I love this word. And it's a great example of scientific word because it's a process, a verb that has been turned into a noun by adding this ending to it. It's got lots of syllables. And it has both Greek and Latin roots, which is really cool. That's great. Nobody understands this word, and it's not useful for teaching people this word. It's much more useful to use an analogy and a concrete subject to have them understand it. If you want to use the everyday language to introduce the scientific language, I think that's great. We try to do that in the Visitor Center. It's not that we don't want people using scientific registers or understanding them. In fact, we think the best way to have them understand them is to start over there and introduce these pieces as necessary so that they do end up using them eventually, but using them in a way that makes sense. Okay, I only got 2 more slides. So we had a scientist who wanted to work with us to build an exhibit on numerical modeling, right? And so she did interviews with people out front in the Visitor Center about numerical modeling. One person out of 75 interviewees could actually define numerical modeling, right? Which is not a big surprise. They could all define modeling, but they weren't talking about numerical modeling ever. So how does she make her work about numerical modeling of basically she's trying to model the currents in Yaquina Bay, right? That's what she's trying to do. How does she make that relevant to an audience that doesn't even understand the terminology or the idea that you would even try to do it? Well, she did it by creating a whole exhibit that basically puts what she does, she's a physical oceanographer, biology, and a numerical modeler, into a context that people can get their heads around, which is oyster restoration, native oyster habitat restoration. Finding that, and for most of you, your work actually has these very clear, very concise, easy hooks to everyday experiences and people's interests. But landing it on that is it's not just a way to get them interested. It also will help make it relevant and memorable. It helps them connect it to their prior knowledge, and Rick used that same terminology. That is the crucial thing, because they got prior knowledge, and if you pitch too high, they're going to not get it. If you pitch too low, they're going to not be interested. But if you can hit right there at it, then they'll engage, and you can actually pull that knowledge up like that. So that's the idea here. Find some piece, and this is nice because it's got multiple modes. It's got the whole 9 yards. I think this is actually a pretty good example of an exhibit in process. But see if you can find that thing, that so what, that will make it relevant to your audience and your visitors. And live animals will do it almost always. So if you've got any connect to biology and live animals, you're golden. So this is the last thing I want to say. it's not about the demonstration, it's not about the display, it's about you. The whole Marine Science Day is about you, and that's why people are coming, because they can come to the visitor center or the aquarium anytime and learn about the science. What they can't do is interact with the scientists and see the labs and get behind the scenes, and that is such a huge thing for people. They love it. They love the feeling that they've been let into let behind the curtain of science, and they see it happening, and it really does happen, and this is how it works. I got to see people using these weird microscopes, all this stuff. They like that. People really love that. And they love talking to scientists, and they get really jazzed by it. As a result, you are the most important part of your demonstration, your display, your activity. And it's the conversations that you promote and that your activity promotes that cause the learning, that cause the interest, that spark the interest, that will make people come back or try to find out more or care. I mean, literally, if they leave caring about your work, that is a really big step. One of the best things that you can do is talk less and listen more at your station. And that's also hard to do because people are going to be asking you questions, and they're going to be asking you questions you know a lot about. But if you can use questions to them, especially heading them off at the pass, asking them questions first before they start asking you, then you can find out something about what they know. And if you know something about what they know, then it's easier for you to make what you do relevant. It's easier for you to adjust your language as necessary to active, everyday, or more scientific. It's easier for you to say, oh, well, you would be interested in this part of the activity, maybe not that part. Right? So you can focus people's attention that way. I think this is really the key thing right here, is asking a few questions whenever somebody walks up, not just, hey, did you come to see our booth? Of course they came to see your booth. Hey, have you ever been here before? Probably they haven't, or they've been out front, but they haven't seen your lab. You can even say something like, tell me what you know about fish habitats, because you'll be surprised. Some people will just take that on and tell you a lot. And that gives you a jumping off point for helping them understand more. And some of them say, well, I don't know anything. What do you? Well, here's what we do. Here's how we try to find out. That's really crucial, promoting the conversation. And the best way to promote conversations is Socratic dialogue. It's the same, still the same, 2,000 years later, 4,000 years later. Ask a few questions. Keep asking questions. Am I making sense? Do you understand? Would you like to know some more? Is there something I can help you? Can clarify that kind of stuff? That will go a long way in these activities. Okay, boom. I'm going to stop there. Take questions, comments, ideas. Hear from you ideas about what you're doing, or if people have specific questions about what they're thinking about setting up, we can talk about them a little bit. Mm-hmm.
So how do you define free choice learning?
So I define free choice learning as the learning that happens when people believe they have a choice and control over a whole variety of variables, including how much they spend, how much time, who they get information from, who they trust and don't trust as sources, whether they're doing it alone or with their family, that kind of thing. And I think it's very important to qualify that with the statement that I say believe they have choice, because there are a lot of conditions where we think we have a lot of choice and we don't, or those choices are curtailed in particular ways, and we are very interested in that too. So we're interested in those moments where people think they're having choice and control, and either really having it or not really having it, and how we promote those as well as how we understand them. It's most of the learning that happens in most of your life. Because once you leave school, most of what you're learning, you're not being certified that you got it by somebody else. Nobody's breathing down your neck making you do it. You're learning it for yourself. Sometimes on the job, sometimes at home, but that's the kind of thing. And that's what we do out front. So the research we do out front is largely about that, because most of the people who come in the visitor center don't have to be there. Only about 15% of our audience is school groups. I don't know if any of you know that, but about 85% of the people who come in the door come as part of a family on their leisure time. Rick pointed this out too. If you want to know what it's going to look like on Marine Science Day, you should go out in the visitor center today, this afternoon sometime. We've had 12, 15, 1,600 people a day all week because of spring break and rain. And if the weather's like this on Marine Science Day, we'll get those same kinds of crowds through and more. And so at any given point, there'll be those kinds of crowds, we hope. So if you want to know what it feels like, go stand around out there and try to talk. If any of you have exhibits out there, go stand at your exhibit and try to talk to people for a little bit, and you'll find out a lot. Yep.
We work with Zoplankton, and we tend to show live
Oh, yeah.
in our attempt to, but a lot of them end up doing a lot of facilitating with a microscope and trying to
Yeah.
get people, especially kids, at the right level and the right focus.
Yeah.
and that ends up being a lot of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I do.
32-inch screen available.
So we should talk about borrowing one from somebody here from the education program if we're not going to be using them that day, because we have these this is one of ours. We have these on carts, 2 or 3 of them, and or any kind of monitor. It doesn't have to be a big 32-inch flat screen, but any kind of monitor. Plus these are we just have there's various ways to do this. Some of the cameras plug directly in. What we use is a scope. We just put the scope on the dissecting. It's a little micro. Little projector scope. You put it right on the eyepiece. You get it focused on there, and then it just displays up here on a screen like this. It makes all the difference in the world, because you can show people don't have to use the microscope. Is a huge problem in public education and school education too, because kids are looking in there and oh yeah, I see it, and they don't see anything. So if you can plug into something like this or set up where you can, that's great. You can do the same thing with a laptop. Even a 15-inch laptop or a bigger laptop. Mine works fine too in this kind of context. But if you have several laptops that have these scopes on them, people can still stand back and see it. They're going to want to get up close to see details, but they'll have a much better viewing experience than they will on trying to use the microscope, and it'll free you up to not worry about the techie stuff and focus on what they're seeing and talking about. Yeah, and if you don't feel like you have access to those things, talk to me, talk to Bill Henshumaker, talk to Tracy Cruz, and because we have that stuff, and we'll be using some of it that day, but we won't be using all of it, and so we can maybe help make some of that available. There's also other resources on campus around here that would have some of that stuff too.
Can you talk a little bit more about breaking the ice, that first interaction, give some examples?
Yeah, and the nice thing is that you don't need to do too much, because this is the audience that's coming up to you is going to be attracted by something on your table, and that I guess that should be the number one thing. Having something that looks either complex or scientific, or it has a live animal or something you can touch, will draw people to the table. So we do this with live animals and with pelts and with skulls and things like that out front all the time, where a sea otter pelt is like a magnet. People will come from 20, 30 feet away. They'll just zero in on it and just ring, and you can talk about whatever you want at that point. But having something that represents what you do, or looks scientific, or looks like the kind of stuff you do, or live animals, or an interesting looking interactive, that's the main thing that's going to draw people to the table. Once they've come up to your table, they're now expecting to interact with you in some way. So it's not so much breaking the ice as starting that interaction. And my best suggestion on that is to use some kind of open-ended question. Have you seen? And one of the things you might do is, wherever you're set up, if there's somebody who's doing something similar or very different, you can ask if they've seen that. Because if they have, that gives you a place to jump off from. Oh, have you been up and seen what they're doing over there? Oh yeah, that's very interesting. This is what we do. Boom. Another one is to if you've got whatever your content area is, you can ask about the content area. I'm thinking about Rob Surin's exhibit out front, where we have some models of albatross, and they're really interesting looking to people. When they come up, you can literally just ask them, have you ever seen an albatross before? We got 2 kinds here. Let me tell you this, what do you notice about them? And this, if you've got anything, this is something we teach graduate students all the time, if you have anything on your table that's a sample or a specimen or a stuffed bird, whatever it is, that people can see, one of the best questions to ask people immediately to start the conversation is, what do you notice about this thing? Tell me what you noticed about this, because that starts that prior knowledge conversation with them. They'll tell you what they see, and then you can use that as a jumping off point for the conversation. Well, here's what I noticed. Well, I hadn't thought about that. Or, yeah, everybody noticed that today, and boom, boom, boom. So I think the nice thing is they expect to communicate with you when you walk up. It's not like when if you're selling Girl Scout cookies and people are trying to avoid your gaze at the grocery store as they're walking out. They expect to have an interaction with you, and they will probably do most of the initiation. But the best way for you to initiate is probably with just an open-ended question, because that will force them to tell you something you don't know about them, basically, and that just opens the conversation. It's just like meeting somebody at a conference or being at a being at the bar at the conference and you don't know anybody there, and you can always ask, well, what do you do? But in this case, what do you do for a living? But some kind of open-ended question like that.
Educators are encouraged today to use techniques such as discovery learning, scientific method. Do you recommend building those types of styles into it?
I do. So most of these are about inquiry. Most of these are about having people do something that illustrates the point, the big idea, and then have them articulate that big idea back to you in some way, so they got it. And that's exactly why in almost all the examples I put up here, they are you've got a lot of hands-on activities of doing things. The idea here is that you don't want stuff just for the sake of having stuff. You want stuff that gets people interacting with it in a way that illustrates the big idea, or that they have to apply the big idea in order to understand what this is about and what they're doing. And that's a little tricky, but there's two really good, I should actually mention, there's two really good websites for this kind of activity. One's called The Bridge. It's from VIMS, so Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences, and it's a ocean sciences curriculum website. And what's nice about it is they got formal and informal curriculum, and you can literally just browse through there for activities that you can do on a tabletop that would illustrate, and you can do it by theme or keyword. So you might check that out, because it can give you some ideas of something you might do to tie in with your work if you don't have an activity you definitely want to do, or the kinds of questions you can ask. Because when we write curriculum like this, for instance, we actually give a list of questions. Most of them do. Here's the questions you can ask to guide people through the activity. And that's what you're really looking for, is guiding people in some, not just letting them do the activity willy-nilly. That's not science teaching and learning. That's doing activity. But guiding them through from point A to point B in some logical manner, that's science teaching. And you don't have to tell them everything to do that guiding. But giving them some resources and asking them to interact with them and asking them to talk with you about what they're observing, seeing, feeling, doing. That's the big thing. But if you Google science curriculum or Bridge, ocean science curriculum, you'll get it. If you go to the COSI, if anybody comes by my office, I get these great discs from the COSI network. 13 COSI centers have put together all the COSI curriculum, most of which is for informal audiences like these, on a CD now, and you can download it from the website, or I can give you a copy. I think there are 300 activities on that disc for public audiences like families in these cases, as well as school groups. The other good site is, if you haven't seen it, the Alaska Rivers and Seas curriculum, put out by Alaska Sea Grant. Just Google Alaska Rivers and Seas. It's one of the best, most well worked out curriculum sites for ocean sciences I've ever seen. And there's a lot of fisheries stuff in those curricula because it's Sea Grant stuff. And you can get some really good ideas for just activities that you can set up and have people do, and the kinds of things you can say or ask them to do that will promote the learning.
We're an adult facility for the most part.
An adult facility?
So how do you adapt to kids? And all people here are
Yeah.
all our counters.
Yeah. So you see what these guys did. They actually got they got a sheet from somewhere and put it over. These are just these big Stairlight crates. They brought all their activity in a Stairlight crate. Here's everything we got, from Walmart or whatever. So here's our stuff. They put their stuff down. They threw the sheet over the crates, and that became the workstation for little kids. That was a really good idea, because we were talking about the storage earlier. Where are you going to put all that stuff you brought everything in? Turn it into a working space. That's a big part of it. Kids will work on chairs as work surfaces if you just turn them loose on them. But that's that accessibility thing. It's hard, but thinking about, what have we got in the space that a kid can sit on, can stand at, can work on, that's lower than one of these tables, or it can be done on the floor. Use the floor. Parents don't mind their kids running around on the floor, and it's not going to hurt them. I hope. So, but that's what I would suggest: is use resources like that, and you can cover them with butcher paper or anything. It doesn't have to be a sheet or something like that. You can see that they're using chairs back here, the backs of chairs, to hold up the little whiteboards that they've got. And these are just, this is just big Post-it note paper that you get at Staples. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be really do-it-yourself looking and feeling. People appreciate that. They won't feel like they're going to break it. They'll feel like you put it together for this activity and for them, rather than something you roll out at every event. And that customization, appeals to people. So, other questions? Great. If you have other questions, or if you have ideas, and you think, well, this isn't going to work, feel free to drop me an email. Drop any of the Sea Grant educators an email. Tracy, Kate, Bill Handshoemaker. Talk to any of the volunteers out front. They know how this stuff works. They see it every day. So if you've got an idea and you want to run it by somebody, just feel free to run it by any of us in Sea Grant education stuff. And my email is on here. And Bill's always easy to find up front, so you can get any of us, and we will give you what we think. Yeah.